All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Mic'd Up Outdoor Podcast. I am your host, Josh Tanner, and with me today is my son, Thad.
Howdy.
We just got back from Iowa, and we wanted to just kind of do a recap of our trip out there. It was an unbelievable trip. This is episode 24 of the podcast, so if you haven't already listened to the first prior 23, then I would highly suggest it. But anyway, this is just a recap from our trip out west. We were out there. Well, I guess I was out there for 2 weeks. Thad drew an archery tag this year. Which would that take now?
I want to say it was, if I remember correctly, I believe it was, I had 5 points going on 6. So this year would be my 6th.
That's a lot.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's at least you were 4 going on 5 or 5 going on 6.
One of the two. I want to say 5 going on 6. It was aggressive.
Yeah.
Because I remember last year I went, I believe it was with 4 points, and you're like, oh, dude, you're going to draw 100%. And I got an unsuccessful email, which was quite the bummer.
That's right. So you had 5 denials going into your 6th year.
Yes.
So
5 points going on 6. Yep.
Anyway, we had an unbelievable trip. We were fortunate enough, or Thad was fortunate enough, to get permission to go hunt on our good friend Chad Sharp's property. Chad just bought a new farm this year. Was it 340, 350, somewhere in that neighborhood?
Just shy of 4.
Yeah, just shy of 400 acres there in primetime Iowa, and pristine, to say the least. It was an unbelievable hunt, and this is property that nobody had ever hunted. Well, I shouldn't say nobody ever hunted. The people that he bought the property from, it was a younger family, and it was just them and their young kids that were doing the hunting. They weren't necessarily like
religiously hunting.
No, they weren't necessarily. They weren't managing the property for trophies or anything like that. But I can tell you that this area is.
Oh God!
It is in the area.
This is a jaw dropper.
Yeah,
it's a jaw dropper.
Yeah,
that is for sure. I mean, it's got everything a hunter could possibly imagine.
Yeah,
for what you need.
Yeah, so. I mean, that necessarily you were kind of the guinea pig this year, just to see how this property hunts, and what the deer population is, and just all the things that a rut hunt could be in November. We got to witness it, and I mean, it was too cool of footage not to share with everybody. So, I mean, we're not only doing this as an audio podcast, we're going to do this as a video podcast. And as we talk through the whole process, we'll be able to share clips with you guys of some of the video that we took. I was mainly a cameraman for Thad. Like I said, he pulled the tag. I didn't. It's going to be another probably 2 to 3 years before I can pull a tag out there. And I like this property, with the plan that Chad has in place, by the time that he pulls his tag, because I think he's got at least another 2 years before he can pull, the plan that he has in place and the genetics that are on this property, and the lack of pressure on the property, and then the surrounding properties, I truly think that we're going to be able to, at least if we can keep the deer on there, we're going to be able to grow some booners.
It's going to be, I mean, knock on wood. Let's hope that happens. You never know.
Yeah.
But, I mean, from what we saw, just for the short period of time we were there, and the deer we saw, and the young deer with
the super studs
in like the mini giants.
Yeah.
The baby giants is what we would call them. The baby giants, just, I mean, future booners for sure.
So he had this. I think he got this property back. It would have been like this summer sometime. So
early summer.
Spring. He was able to put a few food plots in and get a couple things done to just kind of just scratch the surface of what this property can do. And like I said, we were fortunate enough to be able to hunt it. So we were out there from, what was it, the 27th?
October 27th.
Yep,
and
October 27th.
I had to leave the morning of the 5th. Had some duty calls. I had to fly out to Nevada to film an elk hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So, which, I mean, I guess there are worse things to be going to do, and I can consider that work for myself. So,
Yeah.
Can't complain. But I was kind of bummed I did have to leave Iowa.
Yeah, because by the time you were leaving, I think we were just starting to get the property dialed in, and you know,
I think it was the night before we're like, yep, the rut has
Yeah.
officially started.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like a snap of a finger. It's
Yep.
like, okay. I mean, there was a lot of action going on the days before, but I think it was like the night of the third or fourth, we're just like, looked at each
It's
other
official.
in the tree, and we're just
Yeah.
like, yep, it's happening.
It's official.
Now. It's happening now.
Yeah. So we got there on, well, it would have been late Friday the 27th. And then we got up Saturday morning. Chad basically, he has a big barn, pole barn there that is living quarters in the partial of it. And then there's an older farmhouse that he's not using right now. So, which is really cool. But we stayed in the pole barn. And
the barn dominium.
The barn dominium. Yeah. Super beautiful. I mean, it was really, really cool.
Awesome. It was perfect.
Yeah. And up to this point, I've never been able to hunt on the property that we stayed at. Every time we've ever gone out west or anything, you stay in a hotel room or a Airbnb or something, and then you got to drive to wherever you're hunting, which mainly is state land.
And it usually is what seems to be a half hour.
Seems like at least a minimum 30 minutes to get there. So, I mean, the fact that we were able to just get up and hunt right on the property that we were staying at was, it was awesome.
That was the easiest hunts we've ever had. Usually we pack 40 pounds worth of shit on our back.
Yeah.
And frickin' blow our backpacks to the seam.
Yeah.
With crap.
Hike in a mile
or two through the nastiest stuff possible. And sit there all day, because why in the world would we want to walk through that more times than what we really have to? So.
Yeah, so it was cool. But we got up Saturday morning. I think you put the drone up in the air and was just getting some cool shots from the drone.
Lapses, good drone.
Yep. And
B-roll.
then we jumped in the side-by-side. Chad gave us a tour of the property, which it's pretty overwhelming, to be honest with you, because he told us that there's no way in the week that we're out here, or the 2 weeks that I was out there just hanging out, that we were going to be able to hunt all of the pieces on the property.
Not even close.
Yeah.
We didn't even scratch the surface.
No, we didn't.
And I felt like we hunted so much ground. But, I mean, towards the end of the trip there, what we were doing, we were going to pull a certain camera on the one side of the farm that we're just like, oh my God, like, we haven't even been over here.
We haven't even touched
the
like, spot.
Why? Like, we went and got the camera to move, because it's been kind of quiet in that particular spot. But we went for a little drive on that side of the farm, and we're just like, I remember you saying, you were just like, oh my God, like, look at this, look at that. Sign scrapes, trails, rubs, everything. It's like, why have we not been over here?
Yeah.
And then we're thinking, we're like, why? I mean, we haven't really had a reason to leave the spots we were hunting.
No, because the spots we were hunting were just kind of initial spots. Like I said, Chad drove us around the property. At that point, like, there's scrapes everywhere. That was on the 28th. There were scrapes everywhere.
Yeah.
All the field edges, and rubs, and like, you name it. It was all just textbook sign. And it was so hard to determine, okay, what are the deer doing? Are they chasing? Are they, in and out of bedding? Are they going to food? What were they doing? So, like, we just basically had to, I don't know, just look at it and go, okay, what do you think our best chances are to, neck a deer down to where we want to shoot them? So, I mean, we had some tree stands, we had our saddles, and we just kind of picked, what did we pick, 4 spots?
Yeah, I mean, we had 3 or 4 spots at a time going, where we had like at least a tree stand or a saddle platform at each.
Yep.
So basically, if there was a tree stand at that spot, I would sit in the tree stand, Dad would run his saddle, or there'd be a platform at a spot, so we'd both saddle. So, like, we had, 3 tree stands, 3 saddle platforms. So we had options to bounce. It's just, that's also the crappy part, is there's so much ground, and we have so many, like, we had basically 5 different options for spots, and it's like, okay, well, I don't want to bounce too much because then you're just leaving deer to find more deer. It's like I kind of say the same thing with fishing. It's like, I know there's fish here,
right,
but they're not biting it. Then why would I leave when I know there's fish here?
And we had cameras out too. We were able to run, what did we run? 5 cell cameras.
Yeah, 5
and then
cell
probably
cams.
another 6 just regular soaker cameras.
Yeah.
So I mean, we did have some intel going in.
Yep.
But you know, the cameras were giving you intel, but they weren't telling you this is the spot.
Right, because there was a lot of times where we were hunting that particular spot with a cell cam over it, and like that we didn't even see, the camera didn't catch the deer that we saw that night. Like, so it's like, okay, well, the camera's not catching everything that's really going on.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good point that you bring that up, because the one thing that, and I kind of already knew it, but you get kind of sucked down this rabbit hole when you have cameras out, especially cell cameras, that camera, it only gives you a certain percentage of space. It only picks up a certain percentage of space of what it sees. And I mean, we prove that time and time again, that we would hunt in a spot where a camera was, and if you weren't there, you'd think nothing happened.
Yeah.
You'd think there were no deer working that area, but in reality, there was tons of deer working that area.
That happened multiple times.
Almost every sit.
Yeah, like the camera, like that one, I think it was one of our last nights. Like we were covered in deer.
Yeah.
And the camera caught, what, one of them?
Yeah.
Out of the 30 that were out in that field.
Right.
But
yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
So after Chad showed us around, we picked 3 spots to start, and then we, marked a bunch of other spots on, on our hunting apps, and we just, we just started from there. Our first spot was like a fence gap that separated 2 food plots that Chad had put in. There was a tree line that split between the 2. Split between the 2
there was
food plots.
Turnip plot. There was turnip plots.
2 turnip plots. Yep. And the one was sitting just above. It was kind of up on a terrace up above the river bottom. Mm-hmm. So the deer would come up out of the river bottom, or wherever they were coming from, because we didn't know at that point. And we were just expecting them to come to one of those 2 food plots and then possibly work through this fence gap. And it worked to perfection.
Yeah, it was. I mean, with the deer we did see that first night.
Yeah, I think we saw a doe, maybe 2 does.
Like 4 or 5 deer.
Okay.
I can't remember, but we didn't see anything mature. But I mean,
no, we did see a buck.
Yeah,
one buck.
One.
Yeah, and he had 3.5 legs.
Yeah, 3.5 legs.
Like he was missing part of his rear leg.
I was looking through my binos, and he was completely missing his whole hoof on his.
Yeah, it was like from
leg.
like I guess I would the knee joint, I guess, so to speak.
The joint.
Yeah, it's completely missing.
It was very odd.
Yeah.
But those deer that we did see read the script. It seemed like every spot we sat, the deer, the small ones.
They did exactly what we wanted them to do, what we thought they were going to do. It's just they weren't big.
Yeah, we just needed the one.
Yep. Yeah, and this spot honestly was not that far from the house.
No, about a 300-yard walk.
Yeah.
Maybe not even that.
It
was
that.
Through a field.
Yeah, alfalfa field, and then down the edge of like a CRP field, and then a tree line. So
piece of cake.
Yeah, so we hunted that spot that night. The next morning we got up, went back to that spot. We didn't have such a great hunt that next morning.
One little buck, tiny buck.
Yeah,
it was a rough hunt.
Yep.
So
I can't remember what the temp was. It was a little bit. It was cool. It was definitely cold.
It was kind of so we kind of lined it up perfectly with the weather. That's what we didn't mention is going out there, watching the forecast, the 10-day. I mean, it was money.
It was perfect.
I mean, it was literally going from 60s, 70s, all the way down into like 40s, 30s.
30s at night, low 30s
touching
at night.
The 20s at night, early in the morning. So like the temp was progressively dropping quickly. And that first morning, Sid, it was cold.
It was definitely
windy.
cold. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, the first cold weather that we've hit this year.
Yeah, exactly.
So getting the body.
Yeah, it was the first one where you're like, I got to break out the heavy duty camo.
Yeah.
The heavy duty stuff, the insulated stuff. So
little nippy.
yeah. So we sat in that spot. We gave that spot a night hunt, and we gave it a full morning hunt, and we just kind of bounced from that spot because there were so many other spots. Mm-hmm. Where did we go that evening? We went to a spot. No, was it when Chad was giving us a tour of the property? Mm-hmm. We come across this really, really fresh scrape.
Yep.
We come across this fresh scrape, and yep. I'm like, and granted, there were scrapes everywhere, but there was something about the scrape. It was kind of tucked away. There was like a bunch of fingers, field edges, inside corners, and stuff that all came together.
And it was kind of back in a little.
It was like in a little cove,
little pocket,
yep.
where there was food.
Yep, there was a little bit of a food plot that Chad had put in. It didn't really do much, but there was stuff in there.
There was green there.
Yeah, there was some green there. Green. He had, I think maybe some turnips or something. In there.
I can't remember.
Like to look at it, you'd be like, that's not gonna do anything. But so we decided, you know what, let's put a camera up here because there was a really good scrape there, and it was coming up out of the river bottom, and there was oaks and stuff. So I mean, it really set up good. Well, that day,
the first night hunt we had, we were constantly on our phones, looking at
checking cameras. Cameras are going off
as we were hunting in different spots. But it was that night hunt, and then the morning hunt. We looked basically from like 5 p.m. till the next morning. We had, what was it, like 10 different
bucks hit that scrape,
and there was one really nice 8-point.
Yeah. Really nice buck.
But a lot of bucks were hitting that scrape. So we're like, well, there's not any like giants except for that one good 8-point.
But it's getting a lot of activity.
It's like, if there's that many deer there's bound to be a big one stepping in there sooner or later. So I remember we went and set.
And that wasn't a spot that we had set.
No. But
we just freelanced off that.
I remember once we got down that morning hunt, it seemed like every day during midday we would get down for like an hour or two, and we'd go move a camera, or check a spot, or set a stand in a spot. And we ended up going over to that scrape. And the wind wasn't ideal for the scrape.
No, because when we hunted that evening and that morning, we had a northwest wind.
Yeah.
Well, the wind completely flipped on us, and it was like a south.
No, it was still north, but there wasn't a good tree on that side. So basically where the scrape was, if we were to set up on the side of the food plot with the scrape, our wind would have been directly into the deer's face the scrape. So we set up on the opposite
side of the food plot,
which worked out great.
Yeah.
For when deer came in, because they all came upwind from us.
Yep.
It was perfect.
Yeah. And I think we did that, and it put us out of bow range of the scrape itself. It put us on one side on the opposite side of the plot, the opposite side of the scrape.
I think it was about 70 yards.
About 70 yards.
80 yards.
But what we decided to do is we took a decoy out.
Yep.
We had a boss buck decoy, and we're like, okay, well, it's time of year. Let's try the decoy. So we took the buck decoy out with the antlers and stuff. And granted, this is we forgot our decoy when we left. So we had to stop at Cabela's, buy this decoy, and they had this boss buck decoy, which
they are not shitting when they say boss.
No, this thing,
it looks like a 7-year-old freaking.
Yeah, it's like a freaking Brahma bull, and I'm expecting the decoy that we have is just a small
scrapper.
Yeah, just a little guy. But
this thing's a monster.
And this thing's huge, and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to scare deer away with this freaking thing. But
which, it's Iowa. It's the rut.
Yeah.
You don't know what to expect.
Right. Yeah. So we put the decoy out, and we sat that night.
Yep.
We immediately had results. A doe and a fawn came out, right?
Yeah, and the big doe, they were both studying it pretty good, but they weren't spooked.
Weren't spooked of it at all.
They sat and ate within
20 yards?
20 yards of it.
Yeah.
They sat there and ate, and it didn't seem to spook them.
Yep.
They didn't run off. And then what'd we do? We hunted there That night, the next morning.
Yeah, but that night's when we had that big. That's when we had
that big 8-point that we saw on camera.
The buck roar.
Yeah. Let you explain that.
Right at dark. So we got set up. We probably got set up at what, 1 o'clock?
Yeah,
we went in pretty early.
Pretty early.
Yeah, as soon as we got down from the morning hunt, we went and grabbed a bite to eat, game planned, and immediately went and set that stand. And it was, we got set up pretty early in the afternoon, and we're going to sit the whole night with a decoy. And we had, like I said, we had some action, but like right at dark.
I'd say it was about 20 minutes. We had plenty of light.
Plenty of light.
Camera light, shooting light, all that.
Yep. We're sitting in this big, huge oak. I mean, this thing's got limbs coming off everywhere, and we didn't have to get super high. So, I mean, oaks are awesome coverage. Tons of leaves on them.
Could not see us. No way.
Not
we
a
never
chance
had a deer even look at us.
No. So we're sitting there in this doe and fawn. There might have been a couple different does and fawns that came in.
Yeah.
Right at dark, I see this doe come out into the plot, and I'm like, "There's a doe." And all of a sudden, and I had never witnessed it. I only seen it on TV. You just hear this, and like this buck just comes right out of the woods across the food plot from us, out of the oaks, and I mean, just buck roar.
It was ridiculous.
It was insane. It was like the loudest, it was, I can't even mimic it because it was a buck roar.
Yeah.
And he just stomped, took off after these does, ran them around. And did we grunt at him?
We grunted at him.
We tried grunting at him.
Snort-wheezed at him.
And I ended up snort-wheezing at him. He did not like that.
No, he was curious. Because I remember, so we grunted at him. And he was off to, if we're, we're looking at the food plot, he was off to the right.
He would have been on our north. Point. He would have been on our northeast side.
Yeah. So it was thick, but we grunted at him. He was dogging those does, didn't really care. And then I remember he kind of laid off the does for a second. You snort-wheezed at him.
Yep.
And he was making his way downwind of us, I remember, because he was going to come down into that woods right next to us.
And never saw the decoy.
But he never saw the decoy, which is the weird part.
Yeah.
Or at least wasn't interested. And, I mean, he was way bigger in person than he was on camera, on trail camera. Trail camera didn't do.
If that was in fact the same buck.
Which from what I could see through my binos, it looked like him. And whatever he was, it looked to be a giant 8-point.
Just
140s at least. Just
big frame.
Tall, heavy.
It was awesome.
Yeah. So anyways, he was attempting to get down and never did. Mm-hmm. We snort-wheezed at him a few times. It was getting dark at this point, and he didn't end up getting downwind, and they just kind of trotted off.
Well, it got dark too.
Yeah,
we couldn't see him.
He went into the woods.
He just didn't.
Was gone.
He didn't like the situation. He wasn't seeing what he wanted to see. He had, he was just kind of working these does, and he just kind of went away in the darkness. So we had deer in front of us, I think, on the plot. So we were so far back in there. We actually had Chad drive the side-by-side out and he essentially just kind of spooked the deer off by running the side by side out, and we got down, and that's how we got in and out of there in the mornings. We just got dropped off instead of walking.
Yep.
So, what was it the next morning we get back up?
We did a full day sit.
Did an all day
spot.
We did an all day sit at that spot. That's right, with the decoy.
Mm-hmm.
Had some great interaction.
The morning was good. We had
$2,
2 or 3. They read the script.
Yeah.
They came right into the food plot and went downwind.
No, they went face to face, upwind, face to face with the buck.
Well, there was a couple of them that come downwind.
Circled it,
and was obviously upwind of us. So in between us and the decoy, which was perfect, and they were like 20, 25 yards away.
Yeah.
It was like chip shot.
Littler bucks, 8 points, smaller 8 points, not just
nothing
young.
Crazy. Read the
bucks.
script.
Yep.
They
did exactly what they needed to do.
Yeah.
And then what was it?
We saw those couple bucks. We
had
sat
lunch
all day. We brought the jet boil out, had the Mountain House meals.
Cooked them right in the tree. We never got out of the tree.
For anybody that wants to sit all day in a tree stand, get yourself some sort of like jet boil, or there's a bunch of different brands where it's just like this little heater.
Tiny little cook stove.
Little cook stove with a cup, and you get these like dehydrated meals, dump some water in there, and you boil however much water that Mountain House or dehydrated meal takes.
Yep.
And dump it right in, mix it up a couple times.
Yeah,
so I mean it's
so we're in the tree. We're both in our saddles at this point. So I just kind of leaned away from my platform and left just a tiny little spot in the tree, and Thad put the jet boil on my platform and boiled the water right there, and then we just cooked lunch right there in the tree. We never even got out of the tree. It was awesome. It was awesome. And so yeah, that doing that is what keeps you in the stand longer.
Yeah.
Nice hot meal.
Anybody that religiously does, I mean, you could get a coffee press for them.
Yeah.
Like drink hot coffee.
Yeah.
Have a hot meal. I mean, it is
and it's cool.
Game changer.
It's fun.
And it is. And
it's fun.
The meals are actually
Yeah.
pretty good.
They're actually really good.
But something about a hot meal when you're cold to the core.
Yeah.
Is
life-changing. It was another cold day.
So it was quiet. We had those few bucks, smaller bucks that morning. Quiet for majority of the day, and then I want to say it was like around 4:30. We had some does and fawns come in, kind of nervous of the decoy, so they kind of trotted off.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had, I believe, another little buck. I think
so.
And then we did a little blind rattling sequence, and here comes Big Dog again. But
he was coming from
our.
It would have been our south.
Yes.
Yeah. So behind us.
So he was coming downwind, but luckily he was on the opposite side of this hardwoods like finger that came out, and he was far enough away that he never caught our wind. But we did a rattling sequence, and I remember it was probably 5 minutes later. I peeked back, and he's got his nose to the dirt, and he's coming right down this edge, right towards
the food plot.
Yeah, right towards us. So get the bow ready, get the camera on him, ready to rip, and he comes and gets just out to basically where he could look into the food plot, and we grunted at him. He looked in, saw the decoy, and just kind of...
He didn't like it. He didn't like the situation for whatever reason.
He didn't even consider coming in and at least checking out the decoy. It was weird. I mean, I thought that was it. Like he was going to read the script, like came to the blind rattle.
Yeah, so
right down the point.
Yeah, it was weird because I think we snort-wheezed at him again, and he...
Well, that was after he was starting to trot away from seeing
and he
the decoy.
He wasn't an aggressive deer at all.
No, wasn't about it.
For being a big-bodied deer, like fully mature deer, he was not. He was not liking it.
Nope.
And it definitely, I don't think it was anything that he smelled, because he definitely didn't smell us.
No, he would have smelled us long before. He would have smelled us when we first saw him, because he was directly downwind, and there was no way. I mean, he didn't even know we were there.
Yeah.
He come around that point and boom, locked onto that decoy, and he was out.
Right.
He was
and
out.
I don't think we hunted that spot again, did we? Because the wind was going to change.
Yes, it changed to all south.
Yep. So we would have had to change that whole setup.
Changed to all south.
So
and
that would have been
that would have been
Tuesday? No, that would have been Monday.
Monday. Yeah.
So the Tuesday.
Yeah, we're going into Monday. We already hunted.
We hunted Saturday.
We hunted Saturday night.
Sunday
morning, Sunday night, and then Monday. No, we're going into Tuesday now.
Yep.
So on a Tuesday morning, we went down into the bottom there.
Yes. And we did that because it was going to be a really, really windy day.
Like 20 mile an hour.
Yeah, like 20 mile an hour winds.
We haven't tried it. Chad was like, I know this is going to be a good spot.
Yep. This was another creek bottom.
Yep. And just to get out of the wind.
Yep. Just to get out of the wind. So we went down into that spot. That big oak. Just tons of oaks down in there. And the oaks out there this year were just like bumper crop. Ridiculous bumper crop. Like marbles on the ground. There was so many dang oaks. So we set up along the bottom side, the downwind side of a bedding area. What we thought was a bedding area. Cedars.
I mean, seemed to be because
as soon as we got set up.
As soon as we got set up, broke light, we had a buck and a doe.
Yep.
On the edge of those cedars. And from what I could see in my binos, I mean, it was still a little dark. I mean,
he was a shooter.
There was some trash going on on his bases.
He looked like
a lot
shooter.
Of trash from what I could see. So, grunted, rattle. Well, didn't rattle.
Grunted to him.
And he never even blinked an eye
at
us.
He had that doe, and he was going to stay right on her. And then the wind picked up, really, really picked up. So we sat there. Man, we sat there till, gosh, it was quite
11,
a while.
12.
Yeah.
But we saw, after that buck, I think
some more bucks.
You saw two more off the distance down the river bottom from us.
Yep, there was some bedded.
Some rolling up the ridges, going out to chase up the high ground. Grunted, rattled at them. Nothing. Didn't even blink an eye at us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so windy they probably couldn't even hear.
Yeah, it was one of those days where it was really, really windy.
And then we had a little 8-point come down into this, like, the bottom where we were overlooking, where there was like a slight food plot and a bunch of acorns on the ground from the freaking oaks. It's just littered in acorns this year. Absolutely littered. And he was in there for a while. Had a doe come down into that bottom with him. And he was coming up towards her. She was going down in towards him.
Oh, that's right.
And this knucklehead, for some reason, looked directly up at us. And the doe jumped the neighbor's fence and came down to our side and walked right directly behind him while he was looking at us and went down into the bottom. And this Gomer completely didn't realize that she went behind him and kept going up to where she was and was jumped the fence, was sniffing around, nose into the dirt, could smell
Lost her. Didn't even know she was there.
Did not realize that this doe went 30 yards down from him to where he originally was, and he kept going up because he could smell her tracks.
Right.
Completely oblivious.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So we got out. We sat quite a while.
We sat pretty late in that spot.
Did we, correct me if I'm wrong, did we sit back in that spot that evening?
Nope. I think we got out and we went to the hub. Right?
Was that our first sit there?
That was the hub, I think. No, sorry. Nope. Never mind. The wind was going to switch that night, so we moved to the opposite side of the food plot down in that bottom.
That's right.
And we didn't see a thing.
No. And I told Thad, I'm like, and it's partially my fault, and I went against everything that I pretty much have always known, and the lower you get down into a bottom, the more the wind's going to swirl. And we were down in the bottom, and it was pretty steep ridges going up around us.
Yeah.
So against our better judgment, we pulled pulled our stand down from where we were because the wind was changing. We went down into the bottom and thought if we get up high enough, we should be okay. But
we didn't see any deer that night.
No, it was just that kid. And it was super windy.
That was our worst set.
That was probably our worst set, yeah.
But
so we went back the next morning.
Yep.
The wind was right, but we were down in the bottom.
Yep. So every single deer and it was so thick, like the deer almost were on top of you before you could see them. So it's every deer, from what I remember, I believe it was like 3. Every deer would get on top of this ridge, and they're eye level with us. And
they're almost looking down at us.
Yeah, and you don't realize it before it's too late, and they're already blowing.
That was also a morning where it was super windy all night long. The next morning, you could hear a pin drop.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't even want to
freakishly quiet.
You didn't even want to put your hands in your pockets you didn't want to even move because it was so quiet.
Eerie quiet.
Like you could hear yourself think. It was terrible quiet. And we just did not have a very good hunt that morning.
No, we had deer blow at us.
I think we saw a deer coming down to us. Yep. It was a little buck coming down to the food plot, and I motioned to you. I'm like, Dad, there's a deer up there. And the minute I literally moved the camera to get up on the deer,
there was a doe behind us.
There was a doe behind us that we had no idea was there, and she was blowing and blowing and blowing and running and blowing. I mean, and it was so quiet.
A mile straight.
It carried on for, I couldn't even tell you how long, but she was absolutely just...
Yeah.
She blew the whole woods up.
Oh, yeah. So I think it was like 8:30 at that point. Like, we don't get down that early.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. But I was pissed.
Yeah.
I was pissed because I knew we shouldn't have been in that bottom because the deer can see us when they're coming down to it. And I think...
I looked at you and said, dude, we got to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Before another deer shows up. Because we had another...
We had another deer blow.
I think we had another deer show up and blow at us.
Yep.
So that was 2. It just blew up the whole freaking bottom.
Yeah.
And I looked at Dad and said, well, dude, we gotta go. We gotta go. This is
bad on us.
So we got out, and that is when we went to the hub.
Yep. We went back, kind of regrouped, thought, okay, we got to do something different.
We went and checked out a couple different spots, moved some cameras. And we stumbled.
It was just by pure coincidence, wasn't it?
Yeah, we got off that point because we were like on Spartan Forge. You were looking, saying, man, this looks like a good finger. It looks like a good spot. And we were kind of veering down that point to kind of going back towards where the one scrape spot was at, the decoy spot.
Yep.
And this whole edge down this tree line off this point, coming up to the point, was just littered in scrapes. Like there was like 5 or 6 different ones. And we're like, man, this looks good, but the wind's not ideal for that spot, and there's really no good tree. And
we drove down past it.
Yep.
We were going down, and I kind of looked back up at it.
It was the opposite side from the other side from that point, the next point over.
It was a bunch of points that kind of converged into into a centerpiece. And it was really a lot of grass.
Yeah.
A lot of overgrown grass.
Old beans.
Yeah.
And turnips.
Yep.
Right in the middle of that.
Yeah. So what we had found was within all this really thick grass, there was some beans that got left over.
Like old.
From the farmer. From this year. But there was pods on them. There was bean pods on them. And we're like, man, this looks good. But we just kind of dismissed it. We were getting ready to kind of drive back. I turned back around. I looked. And I'm like, you know what? I seen some cedars. And I'm like, I want to go check those cedars real quick.
Yep.
So we drove over to these cedars in the side-by-side. We got out and we're like, oh, my God, there's a pond here.
Yeah.
There's like water here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then we look under the cedars.
Ridiculous.
There's 5 car hood scrapes.
Yeah.
Underneath these cedars.
Right next to each other.
Right.
Literally in almost a circle around this cedar tree.
I'm like, oh my God.
Going down into this pond.
Going down into this little water hole.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And I'm like, this is a spot. like this is spot. There's food here. There's water here. There's like a huge community hub scrape right here.
And cedar trees.
There's cedar tree.
Bigger than my head.
Yeah.
There was 2 cedar trees that were bigger than my head.
Yeah. Thigh size.
Yeah. Thigh size wide cedar trees.
The
rubs.
Rubs. Just, I mean, tall.
Huge rubs. Just, whatever was rubbing on that tree.
Yeah.
Obviously has to be big enough to get its antlers around it. And I mean, that takes a mature type of deer to.
They were 100%. That was an area. So we're like, okay, we got to sit here.
It was. I think we called it like the hub, or I think I called at one point it was like the four-way.
Yeah.
Because all these points kind of like literally converged together, where it almost looked like a 4-way stop, and all the deer. At the time, we figured, well, hell, they could come from every different direction.
Yep.
And sure as hell, they did. Yeah,
they did. We picked this tree. It wasn't the greatest tree. It was really, I mean, it was a big tree, but it had no limbs on it, so to speak. It was no leaves on it, no limbs. We really were just...
It was really our only option.
But it was our only option. There was a lot of the spiny... I don't even know what kind of tree they're, like a hemlock tree or something. I don't know. Yeah. There was only this tree that was available.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let's get up, as high as we can. There's like a crotch up in the tree, and I'm like, let's get up. We can set our platforms, and you can get behind this limb. I can get behind this limb, and we'll see what happens.
And it worked pretty good.
It worked pretty good
for what we were dealing with.
Yeah. And then that night,
we
ran home, changed our clothes, went right back out.
I think we got in about 3:30.
Yeah.
And
it was dead.
It was dead until about 5:15.
Yep.
So this is like, man, we were looking at the spot. I'm like, how in the heck has nothing moved into this area yet?
Yeah.
And it literally was like 5:15 hit. We're like, oh,
see a doe.
Our first
see a doe and a fawn.
First spectator.
Yep.
And a doe and a fawn come out. And all of a sudden, it's just like a tidal wave rolled in. It's like, there's doe and a fawn. Dad says, oh, there's some more. And it's just all of a sudden, it's just like deer every single direction. And by the time you know it, we're covered in about 30 deer.
Yeah.
Multiple bucks, multiple does.
Yep.
And that doe and fawn, after we started seeing a bunch of other deer, looked to which direction would it have been?
Would have been like the south of us. Yep.
Down in some cedar bedding.
Yep.
These does were looking down in. All of a sudden, this big old bruiser buck comes out, hammering down after them.
Yep.
That was Hags.
Yep.
We had him on camera. We didn't realize it at the time.
No, that wasn't Hag. That was Mitch.
It was Mitch.
That was Mitch.
Yep. It was
big
Mitch.
mainframe, 8-point. He had like a little
dagger coming off his
coming
G2,
in his
I think.
3 between
two
his
or
2
three.
and his 3.
Yeah.
Definite shooter.
We didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah.
What buck it was, but we just knew like there was other bucks out there, and he was like substantially bigger.
Yeah.
And come out of there, big old freaking beefy neck, all rutted up, heavy, tall, wide. He had it all perfect, beautiful, mature 8-point shooter for sure. He come out and he veered. He kind of hung around over there. Stop chasing those does, like, because it wasn't really.
It wasn't happening.
There was no hot does.
They were bumping.
Just checking. Yep. And the bucks would just kind of stay with the does, but they weren't like on them.
Mm-mm.
So he was out eating, and he ended up veering out in front of us where we needed him to, but unfortunately was veering a little too far.
He was just skirting us.
About 67 yards, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And that happened multiple times with other mature bucks in future hunts.
Yeah, so that by that night, there was so many deer out there, and it was pitch black. We knew, obviously, you had passed, I think, on maybe some bucks that night.
Yeah, younger bucks.
Nice bucks, And, but it was dark, and I'm like, we're just literally covered in deer.
Yep.
Dad's like, how are we going to get out of here? And I'm like, well, I've done it before in the past. And I grabbed my phone, went on YouTube, and I punched in coyote call. And I've cleared a field that way before, whether or not it's the right thing to do or not. But
they're not blowing at you.
It's the natural thing to do.
Yeah.
So turned my phone up as loud as I could, hit play, and the coyote started yipping and growling and howling away and stuff, and it did exactly what we needed to do. The deer like spooked off, but not like in a way that like spooked off because of us, just spooked off because there was a predator. You know?
Exactly. Seems natural.
Yep. We walked out, said, that's the spot. We're going to live and die here for
the next few days.
We hunted that in the morning.
That morning. And we had that was kind of the problem with that spot is we knew that was going to be a spot that deer were going to stay on all night long into the morning.
Yep.
And we ended up going in there the next morning. I think we spooked.
I
could see was just a couple, but nothing crazy.
Yep.
None blew at us. Just ran off, trotted off, no biggie. Got into the tree, and we saw a couple little bucks. I remember the one little buck was out there already, and then the other little one come from the south. And I looked at Dad, and I said, hey, these little farts are going to square off. They had their ears to they were bristling up. And they're going at each other, coming up, looking like they're about to nail each other. And then they get right face to face, and their ears perk up. And they
hey, buddy.
Yeah, they all of a sudden realized.
Start licking each other.
Licking each other's face. Like, oh, it's my buddy.
My best friend.
So
yeah. Yeah. And I think they just kind of wandered off.
They wandered off after a while. And then we had some other deer come in, I think, some does, nothing crazy, quiet morning. And we sat pretty late, probably till about noon. Got down, went and had some lunch. I don't think we went and moved any cameras that day, if I remember.
No, we stayed out of that area.
I think we just kind of went back, chilled for a minute, had some lunch, and then came back out and sat in that spot. And once again, 5:15.
Yep.
Clockwork.
Yeah.
The floodgates open.
Yep.
Deer from every direction. And I think we saw more deer that night.
Yes. More bucks.
Was that the night of the 9?
Yep.
Yeah, it was.
Yep.
So, yeah, the floodgates opened up. We look over. Here's,
we see one real nice buck.
Yeah, it was probably a 10.2, 2.5, maybe 3.5, probably 115, 120 inches. Great deer. He probably, I'm not saying I'm a trophy hunter. My biggest buck is 120 inches, but I'm in Iowa.
Yeah.
And we're on private land.
Right.
I'm here. I've been waiting 6 years for this tag. I'm going to hold out for something good. So I passed him, and it was a good pass. He'll be a great deer in the future.
He's going to be awesome. Tons of deer.
Yeah, like we saw him, and then we saw another one, and then we saw another one.
Lost track of how many bucks we were
Lost
seeing.
track.
And the does.
Yeah, and looking off in the opposite direction, we turn around, and here's a big old bruiser.
Yeah. Came out of nowhere. We have no idea where he even came from. He was just standing in the middle of the field, just big, heavy stature, and he's just kind of looking around like this is my field.
Didn't even need the binoculars. Like, nope. I pulled up my binoculars, but like just even without the binoculars, you look at him, he's like way darker than the other bucks. He's obviously bigger.
Yeah.
Like
he was a whole half size bigger than everything else.
He looked a whole year to 2 years older than every other buck out there. Even that 10-point that I passed, that was a pretty good buck.
Yeah.
And he did the exact same thing as what Mitch did.
Yep.
We grunted at him, snort wheezed at him. He was interested.
Yeah.
But
he did front up with that smaller 10-point.
He did.
Like, they postured each other, and I'm like, oh, we're going to see a fight here. And, like, this big 9-point, he just, like, kind of, like, just, I don't know if he, like, lurched at him or something.
He lurched at him in that 10-point.
And that 10-point was like, nope, I'm done. I'm out. And then he just...
that 9-point, he was the boss hog of that field. And there was probably 12 different bucks out there. There had to be.
I don't even remember.
I lost track. It was like every direction. There's a buck, there's a buck, there's a buck.
But he never got on a doe.
No.
He just sat out there and kind of fed and did this big
almost
circle sweep around
all
us.
the way around us.
Yep.
And he was like just out of range the whole entire time, like 60 to 80 yards. He was 67. I told Dad, if I have a buck within 50, I'm going to take it. Have I shot 60 to 70 yards with my bow before? At a target?
Yeah.
Yes. and I was pretty confident with it at a target. But just some minute mistakes can happen so quickly on shots that far, and I just did not have the confidence in myself. Sure. I was just like, I probably could have made it happen, but I was just a little, like, anything could have gone wrong.
Yeah, you did the right thing for sure.
Just so aggressive.
But that deer, he kind of just circled around us, and I think I snort wheezed at him because I thought this deer's aggressive because he was aggressive to this other buck. I'm like, he realizes that he's the king out on the castle, out on the playground at that point. So I'm like, I'm going to challenge him. So I snort wheezed at him. He didn't want nothing to do with it. As a matter of fact, I think he circled all the way around us and then just headed back on the other side of the finger.
I don't even honestly remember where he went. He was out there until pitch
black
dark.
You know what? You're right. He was out there.
And we started the coyote call again. Yep. And that was pretty much the night. It was another one of the best hunts I've ever had.
Yeah. The wind never got us. It was blowing, but the deer never.
So many deer downwind of us.
They never spooked.
No.
They never.
We had does constantly looking at us. Yeah, we could hardly move.
That was the one thing that was like the kind of the dead giveaway was that we were not hidden very well, so we couldn't really move. And, I mean, there were does, some smart old does that are like, something's off here. They would kind of look up towards us, but they never spooked.
No.
They never did anything.
They just kind of went on with their thing, but they were always alert.
They were always kind of like, something's not right.
Right.
Yeah.
But didn't care enough to really. Yep. And that's another thing out there is like those deer seem to be so they don't get pressured like they do here in Michigan.
Yeah, coming from Michigan.
If that was a doe in Michigan, she'd have looked up at us and taken 5 seconds to look at us, and she'd have been gone, blowing like crazy.
I don't know if I would even give her 5.
I wouldn't even give her 5 seconds. Just a quick glimpse at you.
Yeah.
She'd have been stomping, blowing, gone. Yep. Those Iowa deer just don't get the pressure like they do in Michigan.
Not on this piece of property.
At least not on this ground where they just they knew something was off, but didn't care enough to run off and start blowing. So,
did we hunt there again the next morning? At this point, I think it's Thursday or Friday.
Nope, we did not hunt the next morning. At that spot, we ended up going to that trail spot.
Oh, another kind of down in the bottom.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think the wind was going to change again, and we didn't necessarily have a stand set for that, but we did have one that we thought we could get into. The camera was telling us that, there was some action going down there. And when going back to when we first got there, Chad had taken us down this, like, trail that ended up going down into this low area on this creek bottom that had a ton of oaks, and there was like this path. It was like a path wide enough to drive a side by side down. And when he showed us that, gosh, there must have been 4 scrapes right in a row.
Yeah,
boom, boom, boom.
Scrape alley
is what we ended up calling. And the whole time we were there, I'm like, man, I want to get a camera on this scrape. I want to get a cell camera on this scrape alley. So we're like, well, let's just go down there and hunt it. We'll get a stand set. We'll hunt this oak tree. We know there's a ton of oaks here. We know there's a ton of acorns here. We know the deer are in here. And we did do a camera pull at some point in that time period where we
moved it down into there.
Yeah, but we did a camera pull because there were some soaker cameras down in there, and we had gotten some pictures of some pretty good bucks down in there.
Yep.
So we're like, let's go try this out. The wind's right for it.
Yeah.
We tried it out.
It was a good hunt.
It was a great hunt. Had some bucks.
Yeah, we saw some smaller bucks. Work right up the trail. Read the script.
Yep.
I rattled in a smaller 8-point.
Yep.
And then towards the later in the hunt, we saw that nicer 10-point. Couldn't really tell if it was a shooter or not. He looked younger, but he was a good borderline shooter. Yep. Maybe a last day type of deal.
Yep. And he was following some does.
So he never ended up coming down.
Yeah, we never did get a good look at him. He was just kind of following some does. So we sat there. Action kind of died down, and then we
boogied out.
Ended up going back to the hub.
No, I think, did we hunt there every night up until the end?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at this point, I think it's what? Is it
Saturday?
It's either Friday or Saturday.
Yeah.
I want to say
Friday.
Friday. Because we went back to the
right.
hub that
We
night.
had to leave Sunday.
We had another good hunt Friday night at the hub. We didn't see any shooter bucks that night, but I passed up on a really cool buck we call crabs.
Well, I think we ended up calling them high tower.
High tower or
something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But it had this like one good side and one gnarly side, but just had like this gnarly crab claw come out, and he was just like freakishly tall, but like he was a young buck. Dad was kind of like, whoa, can't believe you passed that deer. Like, I probably would have shot it, and showed Sharpie it, and he's like, Tan, that thing was freaking small. He had toothpicks on his head.
Yeah, and I'm not like, listen, I'm all about shooting deer. I love shooting deer.
It was a young deer. Yeah. Let's just say that. Yeah. It was probably a 3-year-old deer.
High rise is what we call it.
High rise.
Yeah.
He was probably a 3-year-old buck that is just going to be an absolute.
I'm talking.
Like he's a skyscraper already.
Antlers way up.
But he's just
one
got.
big crab here and then a really nice 4 on this side here.
He's just thin.
Yeah.
No mass. It was young. He was a young deer. He had a long body, but he was a young deer that could just be an absolute freak in like a year or two. Yep. So I passed him, and yet again.
He ran the field.
Yeah, he ran the field that night. He was all over the field chasing does. Yep. But he came within spitting range under the tree, like Hakalugi on his head range.
That's right. He came right into the water, right at the base of the tree.
Yeah. And
that's right.
Literally, I probably could have threw my arrow at him and killed him if I wanted to.
That's the night that he got into that buck fight.
Nope. No, it's not.
It wasn't? Okay.
We saw him 2 nights in a row.
That's right.
Yep. No, it's not. So, had another great hunt that night. No mature bucks. It was the same deal. Tons of deer. I might have saw a big mature buck way out in the distance.
We did see some good chasing going on at that point.
Way out, like 300-400 yards away through my binos. Looked like a good frame and lost sight of him. And then had to run the coyote call again, get all the deer out. Same deal. So, and then we're going on a Saturday morning now. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty. I got to leave in a few days.
Well, you had to leave the next day.
I had to leave the next day. And I'm kind of getting a little bummed out at this point because I got to leave. I got no kill.
Things are starting to heat up.
We go into the bottom again because we moved the stand to the other side back to where we originally were. And I think we saw... It was a quiet morning.
We said we're going to sit here until at least 11 o'clock or noon, and then we're just going to, because we felt like we were pressuring that hub spot too much. We were in there a lot, and it just seemed like the more we were in there, the more deer we saw, but it just felt like we were putting too much scent in there, too much pressure in there. So, yeah.
So we gave it a break for the morning.
Yep. I said, let's go back into this other spot. We moved the stand from down low to back where we originally had it because seemed like the wind was changing a lot that week.
Mm-hmm.
It was not super
consistent.
It
went from like southeast to northwest to southeast to northwest. It was like a couple days northwest, a couple days southeast, and then switched back to north towards the end of the week.
Yep.
We hunted that spot. Super slow morning.
Yep. Hunted that spot, saw I think one buck at that spot later in the morning, just cruising.
10.
Yep, just cruising.
Younger, like 8 point, I think.
Yep.
And that was it. We sat late. I think I took a nap in the tree.
Yeah.
And we got down.
And that's when we made some big moves.
So a money move at the hub
Pulled
spot.
some stands.
It's getting down to the nitty-gritty where we're like, okay, we got to do something.
Got to pick our best
We don't like this tree at the hub because there's deer, does constantly looking at us. None spook, constantly looking though. And the bucks are just not within range.
They're just outside of range.
So back to that cedar where it was covered in scrapes and rubs. We ended up chopping that cedar up and set up a spot for a saddle in it. And it was absolute freaking money.
Well, guys, this is it. The last hoorah. We've been grinding like crazy all week long. We've had so many great encounters. spot. But we actually adjusted our trees down from where we originally were set up in. The tree we were in was just too bare, and the does kept picking us off. They never spooked, but they just were constantly looking up there, so it was hard to move. But we had a big 9 in here last night. We gotta move down to where he came out to. I actually just ranged it, and from where he was at last night, for a little bit, is about 30 yards. So we chopped up this cedar tree pretty good today, and got our saddles set up in it. I mean, the cover is a million times better than what we were dealing with before, so I'm pretty excited. This is it. I gotta fly out tomorrow. Gotta go back to work. But if we can't get it done tonight, I will surely be back before the season is up. So let's hope something big steps out tonight and just do exactly what these big bucks have been doing, because they've all been within range of this tree. So, God, I know I've been saying this a lot, but once again, fingers crossed. We gotta make it happen tonight. Buck and a doe. So I got both tags. Waited 5 long years for this tag. I'm not gonna let it go to waste. Let's get it done.
It was on the money.
Like,
it was awesome.
So blended in, but we had a perfect window looking at where both Mitch and that big 9-point came within probably 20 yards of this cedar tree. But once they got out to us off the point further down,
where we originally were.
They were just a little out of range. So we set up in that cedar. It was perfect. We were just waiting for Big Dog to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, once again, clockwork, 5:15, 5:30 rolled. And the deer come out. From what we could see, obviously in the cedar we can't see as much, so we weren't sure if like there was as many deer out there as there has been. But we had a doe come out, and then we had that younger 10 come back again that we saw with the 9-point the night before, chasing a doe.
It was at this point, it's really on.
It was either an 8 or a 10. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But good young buck. And he's chasing doe, and all of a sudden, old high rise comes back out. He's back again, and he's chasing doe. But at the same time, both of these bucks came literally within 10 yards of the cedar.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were right there.
Read the script, did exactly what we wanted them to do. It just needed to be Big Dog.
Just needed to be a bigger buck.
I know we've said it 100 times in this podcast already, is they read the script. They read the script. Every single deer did exactly what we needed them to do, but we're just waiting for Hoss.
Yep.
He never showed up.
Never happened.
And that was pretty much that. That was another great sit at the hub. We had those bucks, and it was getting dark at this point, and all of a sudden on the opposite side where we couldn't see of the point, we could hear just clashing.
Well, there was like those two bucks like kind of went in behind us, and we could hear them fighting, just real quick fight, because they had a doe. One of them had a doe down there. Can't remember if it was a 10-point or if it was high rise or whatever.
Yeah.
They quick clashed, and then they came back out in front of us, and then they went across this little tiny little cove field that we were in, went on another side of this this finger coming out, and that's when holy hell broke loose.
It was dark at this point.
It was dark at this point. Yep. And we couldn't see them, but they absolutely went berserk.
Like, it was like a full-on
It was a melee.
Full-on rattling sequence that you would do, like a blind rattle, just for 30 seconds straight, just hammering on the horns. That's exactly what it was. I think you might have got footage of it. You couldn't see nothing because it was dark.
I turned the camera on because I couldn't see it, but like I could hear it, and I'm like, I at least got to get the audio of this fight because it was incredible. And we did have one big buck.
From what you could tell, looked like a big body.
Big body deer. I'm like, oh man, there's a big body deer that just ran right towards them. And at that point, it was pretty much dark.
Yeah, like we rattled. I had like no camera light.
Yeah.
But I had just enough light to maybe fling an arrow.
Right.
At like 20 yards.
Right.
If it's much further than 20 yards, I can't see. But it's like borderline, like probably shouldn't even be shooting at this point. And rattled. Nothing. Ended up going. So that was that. That was the night, and
that was it.
That was it.
Walked away.
Unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Hunt. Still got an open tag in the great state of Iowa, but don't count me out too soon.
Yeah. Well, the next morning, probably some of the best footage that we've ever gotten, and literally the biggest buck that I think you've ever seen.
Oh, I've ever seen.
So we left Chad's house. I had to take Thad to the airport in Des Moines, which was about 2 hours away. We get, I don't even know.
5 minutes
away
from Chad's property.
Going through a tiny little town. And we're cruising through, and I'm like, literally, it's like a yard, somebody's yard.
Yeah, it's right in town in somebody's backyard.
Yep. And granted, this town it's tiny, right on the Des Moines River. Super tiny. There's lots of them. But I'm not going to tell you what town it is.
No, obviously.
Anyway, we're like, hey, there's a little buck. And I'm driving, and Thad's in the passenger seat. And he's like, holy shit. Stop the truck. Stop the truck. There's a giant buck standing there. And I just happen to look back as I'm driving by, and I see this thing. And I'm not, it's just.
It's a freaking, there's tree trunks on his head. There's full-on oak trees
massive.
On his head.
I've seen one other buck that probably rivaled this, that he was probably heavier in Kansas several years ago. But this buck was just an absolute monarch.
The biggest deer I've ever seen in my life. So
we go down the street, do a quick turnaround, come back, and this brute is just standing there with a doe.
What I can remember in the video that we took, we got great footage of him.
Yeah.
I got the camera out. Dad was driving. I got the camera out and got great footage of him for, like, I swear, 2 minutes.
At least a
straight.
minute or two.
Yeah.
Yep.
From what I could see in the video, he was a mainframe 15-point.
Yep.
Or maybe not a mainframe 15-point.
Mainframe. He was a 10-point. 10 or 12
with 15. It was either 15 or 16 points. He had, like, on one side was like a split G2, split G3, and just mass. I don't even know what was on his brows. I didn't even really see his brows.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it was like a split G2. Freaking mile-long G3, mile-long G4, like covered. Just, we'll pop the video clip up over top of this talk. But
no question a booner. No question a booner.
Easy booner.
A deer.
But honestly, I mean, he had to be 200 inches.
I don't know. I mean, either way. I've never had a 200-inch buck in front of me. I mean, I've seen him on TV, and this deer rivaled any buck that I had seen on TV that was 200 inches. I mean, he had it all going on. He had the points. He had the tine length. He had the width, the mass.
Everything.
Just, you name it. He was the full package deal, and this deer just, like, dude, he just sat there like a statue.
With that doe.
And like he saw us, he turned in his head, and just the sun was perfect. Sun was coming up. He turned his head, and you just get this absolute wall of tines, and then he turned back, and you'd get the width, and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
He was one of those bucks that you like see on TV or see in a magazine that you're just like, you know, they're out there somewhere, but can't ever imagine in your life you'll ever see
absolutely see
anything like that.
Yeah.
And then you see it, it's just like, it's almost unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, that's a deer I dream of at night when I go to
anybody
sleep.
would dream of that deer. Anybody would
It's
dream
like,
of that deer.
it's like the movie Escanaba in the Moonlight where they're talking about the 50-point buck.
30-point buck.
50, 30-point buck, whatever. Like, telling stories about deer like that.
Yeah. It was incredible. I mean, granted, you didn't shoot a deer. Didn't shoot a buck. But
no,
it literally was probably some of the most fun and most incredible hunts that I have ever had in all the years that I have been hunting. Has to be your best up to this point. I mean, we had an incredible hunt in Kansas where I shot a really nice 8-point years up, probably 4 years ago.
It was like my senior year of high school. 3, 4, 5 years ago, where we had what we thought was the best hunt that I've ever had. But this week, I gotta say,
absolutely rivaled it, topped it.
I mean, the only thing that'd make it better is a deer on the ground.
Right.
But that was it. I mean, other than that, like, I have no complaints. It's called hunting for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to try and go back?
So, yeah, I'm going to attempt to go back maybe for like a late, like, season, kind of December.
Yep.
You got cold.
You got some trips coming up. You're leaving tomorrow for Missouri.
Yep, leaving tomorrow for Missouri to go film a rifle hunt. And then I got a North Carolina bear hunt in early December, and then after that, I think I'm going to try to sneak back to Iowa for a late season, maybe sit over some food. And I mean, in my mind, I think that maybe late season might even be a little easier to kill. But you don't know. I've never done it, but like from what I've heard, it's like, I mean, it's hard to kill.
Food is key.
It's hard to kill a buck in the rut.
Yeah.
It's hard to stop them, to get them even a chance to get a crack at them. But like, you got food. I mean,
and there is some food there.
Yep.
And like I said earlier in the podcast, this property, Chad, has got a pristine piece of ground. It's going to get little to no pressure whatsoever. The surrounding area, which is even more key, there's not a ton of pressure there. And then he's just got a program that he's going to initiate, and obviously we're going to, we want to help, be a big part of it, because I mean, he was super gracious enough to let us come in and hunt. Or let Thad hunt, and I mean, we can't thank him enough for that.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of fun too. I mean, he was hunting down in Missouri on some state ground, which, Missouri that week on state ground, it started out like there wasn't a pressure around that 27th, 28th mark, but like after Thad had left, Chad and I had went down in and hunted some of that state ground that he was looking at earlier in the week, and it looked like a damn Walmart parking lot when we pulled in. So many cars, campers, just you name it, e-bikes, everybody. And like, that's public hunting.
Yep.
Like, I've done it. I've been a part of it.
It's not a secret anymore.
It's not a secret anymore. So, but, our hopes was that Thad was going to be able to get back from Nevada on this elk hunt, come back, finish out the week, maybe get a few hunts in. And he wasn't able to do that. But all in all, fantastic hunt. I didn't mention on day number 2 that we were there, Chad's transmission went out of his truck, so we got us down to one vehicle, which it wasn't a huge hindrance, but that second week when you were gone, it kind of changed up some things a little bit on plans. I was going to go down into Missouri and visit some friends. I wasn't able to do that because of only having the one vehicle, and so yeah, we ended up towing Chad's truck back. Just because the local shop wanted to charge him $9,500 to get a transmission.
Outrageous. No thanks. Sorry.
We put his truck on a trailer, and we hauled it back, which was an interesting event. But it worked out fine. We made it back fine, and so season's not over. Tomorrow, well, I guess if you're listening to this podcast, it might be after the opener of gun season, but as we record this podcast, tomorrow is the opener of the Michigan gun season.
Wednesday, November 16th.
15th.
15th. Sorry, November 15th.
Yeah. So I got to work tomorrow. Are you going out in the morning?
I might.
Yeah.
I don't know yet. I might. I got a lot of packing to do. I got to leave tomorrow for Missouri, so we'll see.
Yeah.
If not, I'll be killing something when I get back.
Yeah. So we're not done yet. I shot that deer in September in Nebraska, and like, we're not done. If nothing else, we're going to shoot some does.
We got to fill the freezer.
We got to get some freezer pleasers. So, But with that being said, we're going to end this podcast. I appreciate you all listening in. Like I said, if you guys get an opportunity to check this one out in the video format, because we're going to overlay all the footage that we had from this trip that we took, and we're going to try and just intermingle that into the podcast as we're talking about it. So, I mean, we got some incredible footage. It'll give you an opportunity to basically see what we were seeing while we're talking about it. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend. I don't know when that video format is going to come out. It's going to take a little bit of time to edit it. But I'm going to definitely release the audio portion of this, and then I'll let you all know when the video format comes out. So, but with that being said, that's going to be it. Appreciate y'all listening in. If you get an opportunity, go to iTunes, Spotify, any of the podcast formats that are available out there. Please go in, leave a 5-star rating, leave a review, and we appreciate everything you guys are doing. I got some folks that I'm going to try and interview here coming up. Our friend Taylor Artis, he went out to Kansas, had an incredible hunt out there, shot a beautiful buck out there. I got to get with Taylor because he said it was the most insane hunt that he has ever had. So I definitely want to get with Taylor and talk to him about that hunt. And then I got some other people that are lined up too. Yeah. My buddy Jay out in Nebraska, he said he'd do a podcast as soon as the season was coming to an end out in Nebraska. He had some great hunts out there. And like,
Anybody that's got some good stories.
Yeah, some good stories. Like, reach out to me. If you've got a great story from this season and something you'd like to share, please reach out to me. DM me on Instagram. DM me on, Facebook. I'm on all those social media platforms. DM Thad. You're Thad _Tanner 1 on Instagram.
I can't remember, but
you're on Facebook. Yep. So reach out to us. We'd love to hear these stories. And,
let us know how the season's going.
Yeah, we want to know what everybody else is doing. It was a tough season for a lot of people out west this year, I think, because of all the acorns. But we still had a great hunt. Right. You just didn't throw your tag on something. Yeah.
Yep, yeah. It's not over. It is not over. It is mid-November. It is prime time. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. So, all right. With that being said, thank you guys for listening. This is the Mic'd Up Outdoor Podcast. We'll see y'all later.